Does this trend cause you to rethink voting in socialism? How often do I say vote in socialism? I say vote in better people, and I still believe that. If anything, like people like Angus King are the reason why I believe that. Because I don't think a person like Mamdani could ever turn into a person like Angus King. I don't believe the power corrupts, and great power corrupts greatly bullshit. I think that's a kind of learned helplessness. Oh, there's no way we can improve the process. It's just like the system is set up so that people are evil. I think that you can. I think there's certainly an element of truth to that, but I also think it's kind of like a deference to fatalism a little bit. You're like, well, that's just how it's like. People just become like bad if you give them the chance. I don't necessarily think that's true. I think that history is full of people who are good before and after obtaining power. Obviously things get complicated, and being powerful often means you have to make sacrifices, tough choices, compromises, and I recognize that. But I don't believe anyone could turn into Angus King. Rather, I think people like Angus King are where they are because they were like that from the beginning. Empty and power hungry, willing to shake hands and agree with whoever they could. There's a reason why New York Democrats historically have always been pretty fucking buddy-buddy with New York Republicans. It was more obvious back before Trump, but like, man, you go look at any photos, the Clintons, whatever the fuck, you want to go back on that, and they palled around all the time. Very few of them actually act like for all the criticisms that I have with Elizabeth Warren has always acted as though she actually dislikes Republicans, and I do respect her for that. Elizabeth Warren has like an obvious moral qualm with the way Republicans operate, and it's evident in her behavior, in the way she speaks, in the legislation that she advocates for. Like there's like a contempt there, and I think that's genuine, and I don't think that being a senator has changed that about her. And that's in spite of my general dislike for her, for reasons you all know. They can't even do power hungry properly. Real power hungry people won't fold at every given opportunity. That only works if you're an oligarch. If you're just a government bureaucrat or an elected representative with no shot at the presidency, folding whenever possible actually gets you in with a lot of people. I'm sure they'll all have comfy, consultancy jobs after they're done with, Congress. Also, people saying already giving up and saying we're cooked for the midterms, now are pussies. Maybe. This is definitely not going to help Democrats in the midterms at all. But like, it's mostly just, I guess, it's just I hate them. I hate them so much. I hate them so much. I hate them so much. You have no idea how much bile I have to swallow to talk about the Democrats as like a general entity and support their opposition to the Republicans. I know fully well in my heart that the average Democrat up there in Congress really does not give a shit. And it's just like a team sports to them, There are people in Congress who do not feel that way. There are people I like. There are, you've got Bernies and Van Hollens and whatever, sure. But by and large, man, there are very few genuine people in government. There used to be a lot more. I bet you that back during the 1950s, 1960s, 1970s, maybe not the 1980s. I'd be willing to bet that within the Democratic Party, a majority of the people there were, don't get me wrong, compliant with capital, liars. Sure, they're politicians. They lie all the time. But overall, in the broadest sense, there's some degree of sincerity. There's a political project they believe in, they advocate for it. I think LBJ felt that way. I think the people around LBJ, for the most part, felt that way. I believe that. I really do, I might be overstating the case a little bit, but I think there's been a trend over time towards this, like, vague nihilism where no one believes in anything. It's not just in America. It's the entire West. You see the same thing in Germany. You see the same thing in France. More and more people who are elected seem to be, there are, like, prerequisites for election. You have to be these empty stooges who are willing to do and say what you're told to do and say. Otherwise, you have no shot because everything's locked out of the party mechanisms for control. All I'm saying, I guess, at the end of the day is, like, this is where the criticisms come from, okay? Even if you don't want socialism, you must agree with the socialist critique of the Democratic Party, okay? The DSA is not just there to implement fucking fully automatic luxury communism. The DSA is there to save this country from Democrats like this. If there were fewer Democrats like Schumer and more like Van Hollen, it wouldn't be as much of an issue. At the very least, then we'd be dealing with actual liberals, ideological liberals, people who believe in liberalism. These people don't fucking believe in anything. They don't believe in liberalism. They don't even believe in capitalism, because even like people who believe in capitalism in the vaguest sense would be more antitrust than what you get from the current crop of Democratic senators. They don't have any principles whatsoever. So how do you even fight them? The only way you fight them is by like going up against the monster of money and PR that backs them. Like the way AIPAC shows up with millions in hand to challenge progressive, primary competitors against centrist Democrats. That's who you're going up against, really. It's not about the like ideology versus ideology. It's a raw clash of power, and the people with the power right now fucking suck and aren't that different from the Republicans, because at the end of the day, they kind of share the same donor list, at least in a lot of cases. Maybe if they don't share the same donor list, I would say that the donor list they have shares the same characteristics as the donor list the Republicans have. Who or what's the true power in the Democratic Party? I do think that it is probably just the same boring MIC stuff. I really look, Schumer's really fucking old, okay? My guess, honestly, is that they're just a bunch of compliant dipshits who got to where they are because they're empty suits, and they're very easy to woo or impress with threats that come from places they've been told are respectable, That's it. I really do think it's that simple. I think that at the end of the day, you could lose billions in independent funding from donors, big and small, all collected by super PACs, lots and lots and lots of money. But at the end of the day, they follow their heuristics. It's not like they're effective at winning, after all. It's really just a question of how much their ineffectiveness is deliberate. And in some cases, I think it's not deliberate. I think that they're ineffective because they're, just hopelessly institutionally dependent, just way too locked in on the existing system of consultancy and kitchen table issues. We'll focus on kitchen table issues. Everyone must talk the same, everyone must respond the same, than they are any kind of actual populist sentiment. But that's the kind of stuff that you get when you try to elect empty suits, right? We've seen what happens when a political party tries electing people who are not empty suits. Marjorie Taylor Greene, she's not an empty suit. She's insane, conspiratorial, and very stupid, but she's sincere, for the most part. I mean, she lies all the time, but I think you get a pretty good read in her personality and intentions. You see it clearly, right? I don't think the Democrats want their party staffed up with that. I think that's probably what happened to AOC as well. AOC was weak and she was made compliant. And now, despite being this she's a fiery newcomer to the Congress. She's this young Latina is going to show all these old white fogies down there at Capitol Hill what for? And now she doesn't do anything other than fucking milquetoast criticisms of the Republicans and hand waving about Democrats. I think it's easier to get people like that into politics. It's just easier to get to work with people like that. A lot of Democratic senators historically dislike Bernie Sanders. Who doesn't dislike Bernie Sanders quite as much? Republicans. You know why? Well, I'm speaking a little bit generally here, but let me try to smooth down the hyperbole. Bernie Sanders is disproportionately respected by Republican senators, considering how far left he is. And he's disproportionately disliked by Democratic senators, in spite of how famously agreeable he is. And I think the reason for that is because Republicans are charmed by his respectability, consistency, and earnestness, whereas Democrats are frustrated and feel condescended to by the fact that he's authentic. The Democrats see him as like somebody making fun of them, Oh, you didn't have to sell your soul to get here? Fuck you, buddy. Whereas for the Republicans, he's just an agreeable guy. He's just like he's just like a fun person to be around because he's nice and kind of a doddering old grandpa, Yeah, he's a reminder you don't have to sell your soul to be where they're at, whereas basically all of them had to. Why are there so many soulless people in Congress? Because those are the people who have the easiest time working as politicians. The easiest way to win as a politician is to be incredibly inauthentic. You have a playbook, a bunch of consultants swarm around you like flies, telling you what to do and what to say. If you have an authentic bone in your body, you're probably going to find it really, really irritating, Here's a fun test that you can do, by the way. And here's what I would encourage you guys to do sometime. Go ahead and look up the oldest photos that you can find of basically every single person in the Senate. What you're going to find overwhelmingly is that the men and women there were, I guess women can't be, but the men were jocks, the women were socialites. It's not even necessarily a class thing. Even for people who grew up poor, they tended to be you take a look at a high school photo and they look like Chad Chaddington. Why? I think that because these people, and maybe they have a disposition for it, it's always been a popularity contest. And for a lot of these people, you know, you're young, you're handsome, you're agreeable. Why not get into politics? Everyone already likes you. You start from it from the perspective of like, you know, do people like you? Not do you have positions that you want to affect in the real world? What changes do you want to bring to the country? For a lot of people, being a politician is a job choice the same way that parents will encourage a young kid to get into lawyering because they're good at speaking. It's not a question of what moral good do you want to do to the world? You know, what innocent people do you want to protect from state persecution? You know, what criminals do you want to persecute? Whatever else. Rather, it's, well, you would be good at it. You would be good at the job requirement. You know, you would be good at fulfilling the technical requirements of succeeding within that career. Their goal is power and success. And now they've achieved it. They're senators. Seriously, go back and look at all those old photos. Overwhelmingly, politicians, when they were young, were these like, because nowadays, I think a lot of people get this feeling because all the Democrats are old. They think, oh, these guys are all like wonky policy nerds. No, it's like Obama, man. Obama is not a nerdy policy wonk. Obama was a fucking jock. Obama was and is a super like handsome charismatic guy. That's the shit he cares about. That's the shit they all cared about, you know? The policy wonkery, the bureaucracy, the deference to technocracy, those are just the ways they legitimize their power now. Internally, they're power hungry voids, and they're acting like it too. If anything, Trump really is just a more honest version of them. AOC might be too civility pilled, unfortunately. Yeah, unfortunately, in this line of work, that does equate to being a massive pussy. I can't forgive it, you know? She has a role to fill. There are expectations that she has failed to meet, you know? It's not good. It's not good. Why not run a new party to run against to replace the Dems? Only two parties are viable in this system, I'm afraid. I do not care if the vessel that is used to win the day and fix this country is called the Democrats. The Democrats, the Democratic Party, is just a vessel. It's a framework, hollow, that is filled with people. And if we fill it with the right people and we build the incentive structures correctly, I think that you can have a better system. That doesn't change the fact, of course, that within our, like, even if you had only great people within the Democratic Party, there are still fundamental systemic and incentive-based failures at hand here, but those would also be present with the creation of a new party, you know?